Caitlin Clark isn't one of the 5 greatest women's college basketball players of all time, and it's because she didn't win a title.
ESPN recently declared that Caitlin Clark isn't an all-time great because she hasn't won a championship, but they still placed Oscar Robertson 5th on their list of all-time college greats, without a ring. It's shameful that men are hailed as legends without titles, while Clark requires one to be eligible.
Okay, so you just really honestly can't make this up, as it seems like the goalpost for the best college basketball player has shifted as Caitlin Clark has entered the conversation.
Clark is transforming women's basketball in spite of these unjust expectations. Despite the fact that 3 of the 6 guys in ESPN's all-time top 10 have never won a championship, they still view Clark's consecutive trips to the finals as failures. Prepare yourself for the startling statistics that demonstrate that Clark achieved more with less than nearly any other basketball player in history.
So here's the thing. Love Caitlin, love how she's transcended the game. I'm not going to go away from that, but in the open, we said, what makes a top 5 player? Winning. The only strike against Caitlin Clark is that she has not won a national championship. That is the only thing that you can put against her.
Caitlin Clark was left off of ESPN's list of the top 5 women's collegiate basketball players of all time for the only reason that she lacks a championship ring, which is the subject of their whole heated dispute.
Really, there is nobody who has been such a front-facing name through a direct reflection of her skill set, but how can you be a top 5 player if you have not won a title?
It's a great point, which is why I agree with you. Convince me, Ari. We're switching them back.
This is absurd because when you look at the numbers, the talent gap at Iowa is truly astounding when compared to other championship programs. For example, during Clark's tenure leading Iowa to back-to-back championship games, she had exactly one teammate who would later be selected in the WNBA draft, Kate Martin. The only other Hawkeye to reach the professional level was Kate Martin. Now listen to this.
So I just want to say, I don't have anything against you if you don't think that Caitlin Clark is one of the top 5 basketball players of all time. But for the simple reason of not winning a championship, I do have to disagree, and here's why. And this is just my personal thought. I think that championships are definitely a team recognition. They are something that a team does together and accomplishes. In the instance of women's college basketball, there have always been the dominant teams. There is UConn, there is South Carolina, there is Tennessee, and at times there was USC back when Cheryl Miller was there. So this is very debatable.
Yes, that's correct. In essence, Clark was David fighting a court full of giants while she fought with little support. At UConn, Breanna Stewart played with the basketball equivalent of an all-star squad that was stacked with professional talent at every position, surrounded by a who's who of future WNBA stars. In the meantime, Clark was performing her own version of 5-on-1 most evenings, resembling the lone hero in a vintage underdog sports film in which all eyes are on a single player.
Caitlin Clark took Iowa to back-to-back national championship games.
When you watch the games closely, you can actually see how much Clark improved her teammates' performance. Her Iowa teammates played with her and showed remarkable improvement. Their shooting percentages increased, their confidence increased, and they noticed that they looked better because of the defensive attention Clark demanded. She wasn't just scoring, she was improving everyone around her.
And I think that the fact that Caitlin Clark started on a team that really did not have exponential, mind-blowing talent existing and brought that team to a championship really says something about you as a player.
Let's face it, when was the last time you heard someone discuss Iowa women's basketball as a title before Caitlin Clark arrived? The basketball equivalent of turning water into wine is contender Clark, who turned a program with very little championship lineage into a powerhouse and led a squad with little Final Four experience to back-to-back finals.
I think it's pretty ridiculous that they created the standard for how good a player is based on what the accomplishments a team does. And while, yes, it is probably the most important thing to win a championship because you do want to work together with your team to accomplish something so great, the idea that it has to be the measure of your individual success, I think is really discounting what an individual player can do, potentially put on a different team.
This situation is similar to Larry Bird's illustrious time at Indiana State. Despite never having a college title, Perfect Bird is regarded as one of the best college athletes of all time because he accomplished more with less.
Do you believe Larry Bird is an all-time great college player?
Yes.
Okay, well, he didn't win it, though.
In contrast, South Carolina's championship team included several five-star recruits who would go on to be selected in the WNBA draft, as well as players who were the best prospects in their high school class. When you look at it this way, the playing field wasn't just uneven, it was lopsided.
Also, and Breanna Stewart is very interesting to talk about because I have been watching Unrivaled, a league that she co-founded with Nafisa Collier, and they did not have the opportunity to put themselves on what you would call a blue blood team, and they were kind of randomly placed together by coaches, by the current coaches of the Unrivaled team now. And I gotta say, the Mist, which is Breanna Stewart's team, is the second to worst team in Unrivaled.
Guess what? Breanna Stewart won a championship while playing with a roster full of elite talent, which made it easier to dominate and win titles. However, when that level of support is removed, the narrative shifts because even the best players find it difficult to lead a squad on their own.
Played at UConn with a bunch of other pros, a bunch of other WNBA players.
Consider Stewart's current performance in the league, which is unmatched. Even though she is one of the top players in women's basketball, her team finishes close to the bottom, demonstrating that even the finest players cannot take a team to championship level on their own without the support of their teammates.
I myself have always had a little bit of a problem with ranking players based on having a ring because it doesn't give everybody the same individual recognition for their talents. And if you are not recruited to a team that, we can call it blue blood team, that doesn't have all the facilities, that doesn't have all the coaching staff, the things that bring teams to higher levels and create a little bit of like an unbalanced playing field like per team, I basically just see it as a bit of an unfair way just to rank a player's potential.
When assessing a player's excellence, we should consider if they elevated their program or made the most of the talent available to them. Beyond its inherent limit, Clark's feat at Iowa, leading a non-traditional power to back-to-back championship games with little assistance, might even surpass winning titles with a squad full of future pros.
What's more impressive? Doing more with less or doing the best you can with the best?
Because I just found a 4-year-old video from SportsCenter/ESPN where they did rank the top 10 college basketball players of all time.
If we examine ESPN's own list of the top 10 college basketball players from a few years ago, which featured both men and women, they had no trouble ranking 3 men who had never won any championships. That's correct. The same ESPN that disqualifies Clark for not wearing a ring had no problem honoring men who had no championships. Let's examine this ridiculous double standard in more detail. On their SportsCenter list, they ranked 6 men and 4 women as the greatest college basketball players ever. Who do we find? Oscar Robertson is ranked 5th and has not had a championship. Ralph Sampson at number 9. You got it? Also did not win a championship, and Pete Maravich at number 3 did not either.
5 on our top 10 college basketball players of all time. Oscar Robertson averaged just under 34 points a game over his career, 3rd highest in D1 history. D1's leading scorer in each of his 3 seasons. He played average over 15 rebounds a game for his career, amassed 79 career double-double.
It's particularly telling how Oscar Robertson is treated in contrast to Clark. When ESPN talked about his ranking, they only mentioned that the Big O's lack of a championship prevented him from being ranked higher on the list, not that it disqualified him completely. Can you believe the hypocrisy? During his college career, he averaged almost 34 points and 15 rebounds per game. Absolutely incredible numbers.
Okay, so this guy, no national champion
Now let's talk about Pete Maravich.
in there.
Pistol Pete Maravich, the D1 all-time leading scorer, 3,667.
Let's now discuss Pete Maravich in their pistol. Before Clark entered the picture, Pete Pete Maravich was the Division I all-time top scorer with 3,667 points. Although he never even won a championship, ESPN hailed him as the third greatest college player of all time for his individual brilliance and scoring prowess. However, when it comes to Clark, who broke his long-standing scoring record and transformed the women's game, a championship is suddenly all that matters.
Pistol Pete Maravich does not have a natty.
Furthermore, ESPN specifically cited Ralph Sampson's lack of a national championship as the reason he wasn't ranked higher, even though they acknowledged his individual brilliance was deserving of a spot in the top 10 all-time. However, Clark's individual achievements, which include becoming the all-time leading scorer for both men and women and being a 3-time scoring and assist leader, somehow aren't sufficient for her to place in the top 5 women's list.
Oh, I don't know what the difference is between then and now and why it has to be. Actually, every single woman that they mention in here also has natties, but it just seems, I'm not here rah, feminist anything, but I feel like the idea of showing Caitlin Clark more praise than other people is something that is very hard for the mainstream media and a lot of other people that are not fans of Caitlin Clark to do.
The lack of a championship is viewed by male players as a minor footnote that could cause them to drop a spot or two in the rankings. But for Clark, it is viewed as a disqualifying factor that nullifies all of her historic individual accomplishments. This is evident when you look at the language ESPN uses. How could anyone fail to notice the obvious gender bias in such assessment? The guidelines for assessing Clark's legacy abruptly changed. The objective post changed, and the requirements were entirely rewritten explanation of why there is one unsettling fact shown by the evidence. Caitlin Clark is held to a very different and much harsher standard by ESPN than male athletes.
Caitlin Clark has set records in college that have not been broken. Caitlin Clark is the all-time leading scorer in points in men's or women's.
It's nearly impossible to understand how Clark obliterated records in ways that no one in men's or women's basketball has ever done before. But if elevating a program is the real mark of greatness, then the records she broke along the way tell an even more compelling story.
Caitlin Clark was on an Iowa team who had never been to a national championship and got them there twice. Not once, but twice. This is not a team with any stars around her, but it is undeniable that this one person raised everybody up and brought them to that level.
What is so strange about ESPN's position is that they literally list all of Clark's historical accomplishments on air, including her unparalleled statistical dominance, before saying, but without a championship, she can't be in the top 5. Can you imagine spending minutes explaining someone's entire revolution of the record books and then dismissing it with a single, made-up criterion?
But I do find it interesting that they do tout off all her accomplishments, records that have not been broken by anybody else, and they still cannot consider her in the top 5 best category. And their ranking is that Breanna Stewart is the #1 best college basketball player of all time. The #2 best basketball player is Candace Parker, and then they have Diana Taurasi, and then they have Maya Moore, and then in that 5th slot, they slot in Cheryl Miller. And this is great company to be in, for sure. And if you think that these players are better than Caitlin Clark, I don't have anything against that aspect of it. I'm just not obsessed with the argument, especially for somebody who went to a team like Iowa, who did not have, championship experience, who did not have stars.
Let's take a closer look at what we're discussing. Clark became the only player in NCAA history to lead the country in both scoring and assists. For a moment, consider this. The best passers and scorers rarely lead in assists and scoring, but Clark did both at the same time 3 different times. You may recall that game against Ohio State, where she dominated both categories in a way that demonstrated how she changed the game. This is not only amazing, it is literally unprecedented in the history of college basketball.
Duplicate. She's a 3-time NCAA scoring leader and assist leader, a true point guard for the people, 3-time All-American, 2-time Naismith Player of the Year, 2-time AP Player of the Year, all-time leading scorer. She broke the records of Kelsey Plum and Sabrina. Literally, there is nobody who has been such a front-facing.
Just as statistics can convey a narrative 3-time All-American selections, Multiple AP Player of the Year awards and 2 Naismith Player of the Year awards are not participation trophies. Rather, they are the highest individual honors the sport can bestow, and the basketball experts who vote on these awards clearly understood Clark's dominance even in the absence of a championship ring. Her trophy case speaks volumes about her impact.
That young lady there in Iowa City did more with less than anybody.
And this is where the double standard becomes unavoidable. When ESPN analysts talk about Pistol Pete's legacy, they praise his offensive innovation and scoring wizardry despite never making it to the Final Four. They call him a transcendent talent who changed the way the game was played, but Clark, who broke his long-standing scoring record and distributed more assists than any guard in history, somehow needs a championship to prove her greatness. What's even more ridiculous is how ESPN's own analysts directly contradicted themselves in the same segment. One even stated that the way she dominated the record books while she was at Iowa was something you cannot duplicate. If her accomplishments are literally unduplicated in basketball history, how could she not be among the all-time great?
Potential. Listen, I do understand if that is how you rank your individual best basketball players based on their championships, and this is only taking into consideration college basketball players. I just happen to fundamentally disagree with this particular theory that you have to have a ring to be the best.
There is no denying Clark's cultural influence. The most telling evidence is found in ESPN's own contradiction, where they admit that Clark's statistical dominance is unmatched while also stating that individual accomplishments don't really matter without a championship. Her game broke viewership records repeatedly, bringing women's basketball to unprecedented attention. More people watched Iowa women's basketball games than many NBA broadcasts.
And it is undeniable that there is one player that brought Iowa to the championship that raised everybody else up around her, and their name is Caitlin.
Look, when we get right to the heart of the matter, some people simply cannot bring themselves to send Caitlin Clark flowers. She changed a program, broke records that were thought to be unbreakable, and altered the way that millions of people view women's basketball. The impact she has had on the sport is evident in the viewership numbers alone. Have you seen how attendance skyrocketed during her time at Iowa? Despite never having won a championship, legends like Pistol Pete Maravich and Larry Bird are praised for their unique brilliance. Regardless of what any ranking says, Clark deserves the same recognition since her legacy transcends trophies, and the cultural change she brought about makes her one of the greatest people in history.